Greetings. It is Monday, March the 31st, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Signalgate, yes, has come and gone. Really, I think everyone realizes there are far bigger fish to fry. Probably will not result in anybody losing their job. It should be pointed out that even though in the old days they'd be using far more secure means to communicate, the culture of the younger generation that grew up with cell phones is different. They consider that a secure, and Signal is very secure. It is very secure, but I'm not really worried about it. Nothing came of it. I think they've learned their lessons and they'll go on to do bigger things. At the top of the heap today, Ukraine insane. So many people are now back to waving those Ukrainian yellow and blue flags in their front yards. They're beginning to forget some of the realities of that horrifying situation. And no, folks, the war did not start with the invasion that occurred in February of 2022. It occurred back in 2014. Again, most people do not drink from the fountain of knowledge. They just gargle at it. Ukraine is turning out to be a far more insane place than a lot of its very left-wing, pro-Biden supporters are willing to admit or even capable of realizing. One of the things that came out this week is crippled dolls using to whip up hate. There's now a new toy coming out in Ukraine. It's called the War Fighter Oksana. Like a little Barbie with a prosthetic leg and a uniform. She's going off to die. Really? It's a toy. They've been teaching kids all sorts of weird things in that country. Mr. Zelensky has a picture over his bed of a Russian warship sinking into the Black Sea. That might have been the Moscow that went down during this conflict. Really, that's nuts. That's come from an article that was published, actually a feature, an exclusive in Time magazine. Yes, they still exist. This guy is mad. He is far worse than, honestly, in terms of the insanity department, than Hitler was. Hitler wouldn't have stuff like that in his home. He'd probably have a picture of Eva Braun over his bed, or he'd have a picture of something of quality on the wall. I mean, the guy was an artist, so to speak, but no, Mr. Zelensky is into hate and anger and death and killing. The massive sizes of Ukrainian cemeteries is rapidly expanding even further. This guy is not into peace. He's into death. You wonder if he has a soul, or if he does, who owns it? What owns it? The situation in Ukraine is probably not going to get better until this guy is removed from the scene. Either he flees to another country with his ill-gotten billions, that's with a B, and that's your money, America, or somebody decides to take him out. I don't think he's the type who'd take out himself. Too high class, I guess, which says something, doesn't it? I'd recommend to everyone go out and read the Time magazine feature. It just came out. That very old, once esteemed magazine has committed a rare act of journalism. So let's celebrate and read. But it's very frightening to read that. That's what you've been supporting. And that's what's been responsible for keeping this war going far longer than it ever needed to go. And speaking of war and all the fun times it can bring, the United States seems to be gearing up towards possible action against Iran. We know this because you can't really keep that many secrets anymore, and many B-2 stealth bombers and support aircraft have shown up at the remote, top-secret Indian Ocean installation known as Diego Garcia. Why are they doing that? Well, it's those are planes that can carry 6,000-pound nasty bombs, bunker busters, I believe they're called, which is what they'll probably be using to take out Iranian nuclear facilities. like it or not, the United States does the bidding of Israel, and that Jewish state has wanted to destroy Iran for the longest time. And now that they have a very pro-Zionist government in the White House, well, all bets are off. Simple explanation, but sad. Hopefully that's just being used as a stick while a carrot is being dangled in Iran's face. A war with that country would be devastating for everybody involved, especially the United States. Doesn't matter how nasty the people are that run that place. Whenever there's a few despots at the top that have very insane ambitions, it's the millions below them that end up suffering for it. Something to watch very carefully. Oh, Gaza, again. Yep, that place is still being systematically turned into not only a pile of rubble, probably going to be a pile of dust before long. People were protesting Hamas, obviously pointing out the obvious. Yeah, these crazy Islamic fundamentalist, insane asylum refugees are pretty much responsible for the mess that they are enduring and the suffering they have felt, down to their bones and down to their dead children. Oh, but guess what? Hamas has been hunting down and killing the organizers of these protests. What'd you expect? These are people that believe death is a great thing. You see all those interviews of mothers who are proud that all of their children have died martyrs? You see, religion, when it embraces extremism, ceases to be religion. It tends to be then, at that point, insanity, usually homicidal insanity. Now, I'm sorry to point out the obvious yet again, but Israel has pretty much won that fight. Love them or hate them, the Israelis are calling the shots. The Palestinians are toast, and with a pro-Zionist administration in the White House, that's not going to change anytime soon. They're not going to have a homeland. There's not going to be a Palestinian state. The West Bank has been virtually absorbed by Israel. There's only a few settlements of Palestinians here and there. Gaza's been obliterated. There's talk about resettling the Palestinians in other countries where they're not going to be treated very well at the hands of their Muslim Arab brothers and sisters. They're going to be put in camps. And they're going to stay there until they eventually dissipate into history. They blew it, too. The Palestinians blew it. Yasser Arafat was arguably the worst enemy that the Palestinian people ever had. They tried to gain international sympathy back in the 60s and 70s when there were far more of them and they were far more educated and far more politically astute. But they blew it. And there's no takeovers when it comes to international politics and empires that absorb other lands and conquest. There's no takeovers. So the only people who are going to make out this are those who sell all those made-in-China Palestinian flags that you see everywhere. It's not going to amount to anything. It's not going to go anywhere. Rest in peace. And if you want the killing to stop, just stop it. Speaking of terrorism, Tesla terrorism continues in the United States. Admissions by some of those so-called protesters that they are being paid and for some unknown reason seem to depart their scenes of protests at very specific times, usually around noon. Right on the button. They just leave like they're off the clock. I wonder why that's the case. People are still vandalizing Teslas. The Cybertrucks have 9 cameras on them, and they're all working. So many people are being arrested, they're going to be doing years in prison. I mean, you're talking up to 20 years for domestic terrorism charges. Meanwhile, a man was arrested in Idaho for hitting a pro-Musk, pro-Trump protester with his car. Now, fortunately, he wasn't seriously injured. This was an older guy in his 70s that was angry with the crowd, hated Trump, hated Teslas, hated Mr. Musk. I don't know what was his motivation, but that could have been much worse. That guy could have been killed. I hope the new FBI director investigates the attacks against Tesla owners and dealerships for what they are, what it is: terrorism, perpetrated by those who are in the service of the corruption of the deep state. You're all being played for fools, those of you who are anti-electric cars. All of you are being played for fools. Oh, speaking of the FBI, anything new on the Epstein files? No, didn't think so. But speaking of fools, European leaders seem determined to have war with Russia. Yes, they want to have war with Russia and start trading their butter for guns. Quite insane. Most of the leaders behind this new give war a chance mentality, well, they're ignoring the lessons of their own history. And you know what? A lot of them tend to be women. Did you notice that? Has anyone noticed that, or at least been willing to talk about that? A lot of these European leaders, defense ministers, and all these other parliamentarians are screaming for war. Some of them, including the unelected EU bureaucrat that heads up this mess, they seem to be DEI hires at the highest level. I don't know any other explanation. I've met very competent women in government. How these people are heading up affairs, that's, something's fishy there. A lot of these EU bureaucrats were never elected, by the way. They were appointed, so it's pretty easy to get a DEI hire for something. This is what the quest for equality and inclusion leads to, folks. Mediocrity and incompetence at the highest level, which always leads to disaster. There's no indication and no evidence whatsoever that Russia has any interest or intention of invading Europe. Only if they're threatened will they bother threatening back or doing something. And even then, it's a pretty lopsided fight. So why you'd want to go poke the bear, so to speak, there's you gotta wonder here. One must keep the global military-industrial complex happy, though, and that's probably what's going on. If the Americans don't want to get into wars anymore, maybe the Europeans will keep a handful of people rich and a lot of people dying. The people at the top of the military-industrial complex, which is a global enterprise, they wash their hands daily with the blood of those they have a hand in killing. Oh, speaking of the EU and other silly things in this world, that rather hysterical video of the lady. You saw that? The lady who's the commissioner of, get this, her title is Commissioner of Equality, Preparedness, and Crisis Management. I kid you not. Equality, meaning if somebody is going to get into the job because they have to be equal to someone else. Preparedness of what? Military? I don't know. Nail polish remover? It's hard to tell. And crisis management. This is a lady named Haja Labib. I hope I pronounced it right. No joke. That's her title. Equality, Preparedness, and Crisis Manager. And she did a video where she pulled out her purse and pulled out some energy candy bars and a few other items like a little flashlight, a little Swiss Army knife. And they're now saying that Europeans need to have 72 hours worth of supplies. 72 hours. I keep saying how different Americans are from Europeans. Can I point something out to you folks? 72 hours is nothing. You think your government is going to get its act together in 72 hours to feed, clothe, and shelter you after a catastrophe or a nuclear war? Because that's what they keep talking about. They're talking about what to do with nuclear weapons right now. It's quite insane. Americans who are living outside urban areas tend to have 2 years' worth of food stored. And just about everybody I know has a 1-month emergency supply of freeze-dried food. In fact, many places on YouTube advertise that. Most of the people that are in the news business, maybe the people that are listening to my podcast on YouTube might have that ad popping up. And you also need weapons. Sorry. If you have a supply of food, you're going to need to be able to protect it and protect yourself from somebody who's going to try to take it. This is what I really don't get about Europe. You guys used to be the adults of the world. Now you're the kids. And you're not even the smart kids. Really. This was the most unconvincing video. I mean, it's memed everywhere now. That's what a friend of mine told me. He's in this for the memes. He said, I'm sticking around as long as I can because the memes are going to only get better and better. Well, maybe we should invade Europe, or we already have all these bases. Maybe we should just take over all these governments. Not to do anything nasty, just to teach them to be adults. Give them a slap on the face and say, wake up. Come on, guys. Our civilization came from yours. You can't just throw this all away. You don't want a war. You've had a few too many, really. The history of the white race in Europe is often just a list of bloody conflicts where they've slaughtered each other. If you think about it, every war in Europe was a civil war, if you look how small the place is. I think that you've got to start thinking towards not having war. Okay? It's something that might be going against your DNA, but we'll have to do something about that. Speaking of potential conquest, J.D. Vance and his wife visited Greenland a few days ago. That was an interesting... He didn't go to the capital there called... I'm not going to pronounce it. This will be a story to watch because in spite of what many people might think, the U.S. does need to control that place, or one of the other big players will. That's just called realpolitik. It's political reality. I don't know what the population is of Greenland. I think it's less than 100,000. It's not many people at all. There's no way they can become an independent country. And Denmark basically does nothing. The U.S. has military bases there, an early warning, but the big problem is that Greenland is guilty of geography. It's in the right place or the wrong place, depending on your thoughts. It also has a lot of minerals. Whether you believe in global warming or just cyclic seasonal change or global changes that happened over centuries, it's beginning to get warmer up there, so the Chinese, the Russians, and maybe some other people might find it interesting, especially the Chinese, which is why the U.S. has to control it. Did you know that President Truman offered to buy Greenland from Denmark? It was quite a large amount of money in gold. Denmark turned it down. U.S. should have just taken it over back then and be done with it. You see, it makes more sense for the U.S. to have a big say in running that place because Russia and China have their eyes on Greenland, and they will not be anywhere near as pleasant if they take it over. If the U.S. does, they'll be treated pretty well when it's all said and done, to be quite real about it. But stay tuned on Greenland. That's going to be an interesting contention, and who knows, maybe that'll be what sets off World War III. Now, to close on today's discussions is something I've been trying to avoid, but people are so obsessed with it, it's almost comical. I, for one, am sick about hearing about Snow White and that spoiled little brat that starred in it. I'm not even going to mention her name. I'm sick of hearing it. But all clouds have silver linings now, don't they? That's a very Disney-esque way of putting things. So now perhaps this debacle, which I have no intention of ever watching, just like I have no intention of ever watching any of the Disney-produced Star Wars movies, because I know they're junk. They're products of what I call the People's Republic of Disney. Let's face it, folks, this company that's been around for, about 100 years? They have turned to garbage everything they've touched. They destroyed the Star Wars franchise. For those of us who had Star Wars as children and loved it because it was a wonderful retelling of Joseph Campbell's A Hero with a Thousand Faces, a great book to read. That's what Star Wars is basically about. They completely trashed it. They destroyed it. They did the same thing with the Indiana Jones franchise. And they've done the same thing with their own properties, which were gold, platinum, diamonds, all tied together. This is not anything like the Disney any of us remember or grew up with, and it sure isn't anything like its founder, Walt Disney, envisioned. What value do they have? What value do any of their properties have anymore? I mean, people were still watching the original Snow White from 1937. Now they're going to be laughing at it. They've done some wonderful things, but by his own admission, the CEO of that company, who's responsible at the end of the day for this mess, talked about how a lot of people who considered the company too sacred just had to be let go. I saw an interview with him where he talked about that. That's too bad, because the people who keep things sacred usually have a way of seeing to it that they stay sacred. Right now, Disney has what? Theme parks that people are never going to feel comfortable in again. No one's ever going to trust going to the movies again and watching their films. They've made it more than clear over the years that they will do anything to please their biggest market, which is China. That's why you don't hear about Martin Scorsese's film, Kundun, the one about the Dalai Lama. Brilliant movie. You have to find it in DVD because it's not streaming anyplace. Yeah, Disney produced that, but it angered the Chinese because it showed the Dalai Lama in a very sympathetic role. It's about his life, by the way. Kundun, Kundun. Check it out. One of Martin Scorsese's greatest films. You won't find it on Disney streaming. You won't find it on YouTube for pay. You have to dig it up somewhere. Fortunately, I have a DVD of it. Brilliant film. Walt Disney doesn't value itself. It doesn't value its customers. It doesn't value the people it produces entertainment for. It trashes its own heritage. So what future does that company have? All of these politically correct philosophies that have been increasing ever since the 1960s, increasing in places like academia, business, entertainment especially, it's led to a lot of the mess that we have in our society today. It's led to nothing but misery. Mickey Mouse is dead. Might as well let him rest in peace. Just like all the statues that have been torn down in recent years, America seems to be going through a cultural revolution. It wants to rip out its own brains and give itself a frontal lobotomy at the same time. This is what true Marxism is all about. It's the destruction of everything sacred, everything human, everything worth living for, everything that makes you happy, just so you can trudge along in misery with no prospect for any afterlife. Walt Disney's Snow White, that could be the final nail in a coffin that should have been buried some time ago. Sorry, Mickey. And I'm really sorry, Walt. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share, and please consider a paid subscription. It keeps the lights on literally and figuratively. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. I can be found on other social media platforms if you look for me, but not on Facebook. Never on Facebook. This podcast originates at Substack. My address there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember Clown World and the Deep State must be destroyed. Really, must be destroyed. Good day.